Welcome to your daily English dose. We're here to help you understand big world events quickly and thoroughly. Today, we're doing a deep dive into something really complex. It's about the very fragile ceasefire in Gaza. We've got a whole stack of reports here focusing on this surprising U.S. warning about Hamas.
That's right. Our mission today really is to unpack one specific, quite critical event, the U.S. saying Hamas is planning an attack, like right away. But here's the twist, not against Israel.
Against Palestinian civilians in Gaza.
Exactly, against Palestinians inside Gaza. And we want to break down why the U.S. is calling this Hamas dealing with internal groups a grave violation of the peace deal with Israel. It's a huge step.
Yeah, that's the core question, isn't it? Why does internal fighting suddenly break an international truce? It sort of redraws the lines of the whole agreement.
It absolutely does. And that's what we're looking at, not just the warning itself, but what it means strategically. We're going to show you how Washington seems to be using this internal situation to, well, fundamentally redefine the rules of the peace deal, turning it from just stop shooting into something about how Hamas governs.
Okay, let's jump right in then. The sources confirm this warning came straight from the U.S. State Department. They said they had credible reports. That sounds serious.
Very serious. And they use the word imminent, meaning, could happen any moment.
And the target, as you said, specifically Palestinian civilians, not Israeli soldiers, not settlements, Palestinians.
Right. That's the absolute shocker here. The focus isn't external aggression. It's Hamas's own actions inside Gaza.
And the State Department didn't mince words. They called any planned attack like this a direct and grave violation of the ceasefire. That language is incredibly strong for diplomacy.
It really is. And it wasn't just words. They acted immediately. Washington informed the guarantors. Those are the countries helping keep the peace deal alive, specifically Egypt, Qatar, and Turkey.
So by bringing them in, it wasn't just a warning to Hamas. It became a major international issue instantly.
Precisely. They put it on the table for everyone involved in the truce framework. The U.S. demanded Hamas uphold its end of the deal.
So how did Hamas take this, being called out so publicly?
Well, as you might expect, Hamas immediately denied everything. They called it Israeli propaganda, basically saying it was false information meant to cause trouble.
But the pressure must have been real, diplomatically speaking.
Oh, clearly. The State Department had to follow up, saying, measures will be taken to protect Gazans and keep the ceasefire intact. It showed they weren't backing down.
Okay, let's get some background on this ceasefire. It started after that two-year war, which itself followed the October 7th, 2023 attacks, right?
That's the timeline. And the first phase involved these prisoner and hostage exchanges.
Right, the exchanges. What's the latest on that? Are all the living hostages out now?
Yes. According to the reports we have, all living hostages have been released. Now the focus is on returning the bodies of those who died. The latest numbers say 11 out of 28 bodies have been returned so far.
And on the other side, Israel released Palestinians.
Right. 250 Palestinian prisoners.
Yeah.
And this number is much larger, 1,718 detainees.
Okay, hold on. 250 prisoners, but over 1,700 detainees. For our listeners, especially those learning English and about this conflict, is there an important difference between a prisoner and a detainee here?
That's a really important question. Yes, there's a big difference, especially in this context. A prisoner usually means someone convicted in court, charged, tried, found guilty.
Okay.
A detainee, particularly administrative detainees, which many of these were, are held without formal charges or trial. Often it's based on security reasons, like intelligence suggesting they pose a threat.
So no court process necessarily.
Often, no. They can be held for renewable periods based on secret evidence. The fact that so many detainees were released tells you a lot about the scale of administrative detention during the conflict.
That definitely adds a layer of understanding. Thanks. Now, back to the situation in Gaza that triggered this U.S. warning. What was happening on the ground?
Well, the sources point to Israel pulling back its forces from some areas inside Gaza.
Yeah.
When the IDF withdraws, it creates a power vacuum. A space opens up.
And Hamas tried to fill that space.
Immediately. Reports say they moved quickly to reassert control, to show everyone they were still in charge.
How do they do that?
Apparently by cracking down hard, putting pressure on rival political groups, on powerful local families or clans, and especially on anyone suspected of collaborating with Israel during the war or even before.
So like internal policing, but maybe quite hard.
Exactly. And this is where it gets really grim. This push for control seems to have led directly to the incident that caught international attention. The U.S. warning came right after BBC Verify authenticated some really graphic videos.
Videos of what?
Videos showing Hamas gunmen carrying out a public execution right out in the open.
Public execution? That's shocking. Well, what did the footage actually show?
It reportedly showed 8 people, their arms tied behind their backs, being killed in a crowded square in broad daylight. A very clear, brutal message about who holds power now.
Wow. Okay. So, that event, that specific verifiable violence, that's what likely pushed the U.S. to issue such a strong formal warning about a grave violation.
It seems that President provided the concrete evidence and the political urgency needed for Washington to make such a serious statement.
Right. Now, let's pivot back to Washington, because the messaging wasn't exactly consistent, was it? It sounds like there were sort of two different voices.
Yeah, it was pretty interesting. You had the State Department being very formal, very diplomatic, talking about working with Egypt and Qatar, protecting the ceasefire structure, measured language,
Standard diplomacy, almost.
pretty much. But then you also had President Trump weighing in, and his take was, well, very different, very personal, and it shifted quickly.
What was his first reaction? I heard it was kind of downplayed.
Yeah, initially he seemed to suggest it wasn't a huge deal. He apparently said something like Hamas had just eliminated some very bad gangs, which, sounds like he's almost excusing it.
That's a risky statement politically.
Definitely. But then he seemed to change his mind, or at least his public stance. He got much tougher, warning on social media something like, if Hamas keeps killing people in Gaza, we'll have no choice but to go in and kill them.
Whoa, we will go in and kill them. That sounds like a direct threat of U.S. military action.
It absolutely sounds like it. And that's probably the point, to sound tough. But then came the clarification, which is crucial. He made it clear that we did not mean American soldiers.
Ah, okay. So who did we mean then?
He suggested other players in the region, or maybe Israel itself, would be the ones to act, easily get the job done, he said, but with U.S. backing or protection if Hamas crossed this line.
That's a very layered message. Threaten intervention, but say you won't use your own troops, but you'll support someone else doing it. Why send such a complex signal?
Well, it's a way to exert maximum pressure without committing U.S. forces. It draws a red line for Hamas regarding how they treat their own people, puts the responsibility on regional allies like Israel, Egypt, or Qatar to enforce it, but signals strong U.S. disapproval and potential backing for action. It's high-stakes signaling, really, keeping distance while talking tough.
Okay, so this brings us right back to the core puzzle. Why does Hamas policing its own territory, even brutally, break an international ceasefire that was originally about stopping attacks between Hamas and Israel?
This is the fascinating part, strategically. What the U.S. seems to be doing here is changing the very definition of the ceasefire after the fact. Traditionally, a ceasefire is military. You stop shooting at us, we stop shooting at you. Simple.
Right.
But by calling these internal actions by Hamas a grave violation, Washington is essentially writing a new rule into the agreement, an unwritten rule.
So the message is, keeping this peace deal means you also have to govern Gaza in a way we find acceptable.
Pretty much, yeah. They're moving the goalposts. It's no longer just about the military truce with Israel. It's now also about Hamas's internal governance. This gives the U.S. and those guarantor countries like Egypt and Qatar huge leverage over how Hamas operates internally.
And they're justifying this by saying it's necessary to preserve the integrity of the ceasefire.
Exactly. It's a way to influence Hamas's behavior without renegotiating the whole deal.
And you can see how this immediately creates more instability, like Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu using this moment.
Right. Netanyahu seized on this internal chaos and the questions about Hamas's control. He's kept the Rafah border crossing closed.
Which is vital, right, for people needing medical help outside Gaza.
Absolutely vital. It's the main exit point for civilians, especially for urgent medical cases.
And Israel's condition for reopening it is linked to the old deal.
Yes. Netanyahu is saying Rafah stays closed until Hamas returns the rest of the bodies of the deceased Israeli hostages. So he's using the current instability, amplified by this U.S. warning about internal governance, to gain leverage on an earlier, unresolved part of the exchange agreement.
It feels like everything is connected and trust is just collapsing. There was also that other incident, the tragic one with the family near the demarcation line.
Yeah, that highlights the danger for civilians caught in the middle. Sources reported 11 members of one Palestinian family were killed by an Israeli tank shell. This happened near the Yellow Line.
What exactly is the Yellow Line?
It's basically the line on the map showing the area still under Israeli military control or occupation after the partial withdrawal. But the problem is it's often not physically marked on the ground.
And the BBC report pointed that out.
Yes. BBC Verify noted it was unclear if the tank had actually crossed this invisible line because there are no markers. It just shows how confusing and dangerous that power vacuum situation is. When the lines are blurry, accidents, or maybe not so accidental incidents, happen, and civilians suffer.
Looking forward then, this whole situation, the U.S. focus on internal governance, the executions, the instability has led to talk about a new idea, safe zones.
That's right. This idea has emerged, potentially creating IDF-managed safe zones inside Gaza. The thinking seems to be that these would be places for Palestinians who want to get away from Hamas control, especially after seeing things like public executions.
Managed by the Israeli military, inside Gaza.
That's the proposal floating around, yeah. If that actually happened, it would be a massive shift. It would directly challenge Hamas's claim to govern all of Gaza.
So connecting all these dots,
Yeah.
the U.S. warning, the redefining of the truce, the violence, the safe zone idea, it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? This whole episode forces a really big question.
What's that?
Well, can an organization like Hamas, which the U.S. calls a terrorist group, which uses public executions internally, ever really be accepted by the world as a legitimate governing body? Even if there's a ceasefire in place. Is that transition even possible under these conditions?
That is the fundamental question, isn't it? It feels like for this ceasefire to truly hold in the long term, the outside powers are demanding Hamas change its very nature, become something it's not. And that might be a condition for peace that Hamas simply can't or won't meet. This built-in conflict between the military pause and the demands for governance reform, it almost guarantees this truce will stay incredibly tense and fragile.
Definitely something for all of us, especially you, our listeners, to think about. That's our deep dive for today. We hope this helped you understand this complicated event quickly, but also gave you some deeper insights. Thanks for tuning in to your Daily English Dose. We'll see you next time.